Good morning, everybody. Here I am again, coming to you from home. I bet you didn't think I'd be able to give you notes on your grammar from home, but lucky you, you're going to get them. We are moving into a difficult section in the book, and I wanted to be here for you and make sure that I could explain some things for you before you maybe dive in and try to do your assignment for today. So we are still in verbals, and this is the chapter that never ends. It feels like it never goes away. And we are actually moving into one of the most difficult parts of the chapter. So let me just review for a few minutes some of the things that we've done and get you into that headspace a little bit, and then we'll talk about where we're headed. So remember, there are three main types of verbals. The first one we talked about were participles, and there are past and present participles. Remember that the present participles end in ing, and past participles end in ed, or some form of a past of a verb, and that they function as adjectives. So anywhere you can have an adjective in a sentence, you can have a participle. And those are the easiest of all the verbals, and you guys didn't have any problem with that, and I knew that you wouldn't. Then we talked about gerunds, and remember gerunds end in ing, and they function as nouns. And again, you guys really had no trouble with that. Any place you can have a noun in the sentence, you can have a gerund, and you guys have done a great job with both participles and gerunds, and you were able to diagram them, and I was really, really proud of you. I think that you were just coming right along great. Now, this last thing that we're going to talk about in this chapter are infinitives. And infinitives are a completely different animal. They are difficult because they do so many different things in a sentence. First off, an infinitive, just to kind of refresh your memory, is a part of a verb, a principal part of the verb with the word to in front of it. So examples would be like to run, to jump, to sing, to dance, to laugh, anything that you can use as a verb and put to in front of it, that's the infinitive. Now, again, what makes infinitives challenging is that unlike participles and gerunds that only have one function in the sentence, an infinitive can function in three different ways in the sentence, three different parts of speech, none of which are verbs, which of course is one of the great ironies of our language. So when you have an infinitive, it's not going to be a verb or really have anything to do with the verb in the sentence, even though it looks just like a verb. It can function as a noun, it can function as an adjective, and it can function as an adverb. So starting out today, we're going to just really ease into this because all of a sudden it sounds real easy, and then all of a sudden it gets really complicated in a hurry. So we're going to take it slowly, and we're going to just do little assignments along the way and practice and make sure that you feel comfortable before we move on to the next section. So today we're going to start with some notes on infinitives as nouns and just a few syntaxes today, like the subject and the object and a positive and a subject complement. So if you take a look at these notes, all I did was pull some of the important information from the section that I asked you to read and look over, and I want to go over them with you a little bit. So the first example is just to look at a simple infinitive, which is the word to and the part of the verb, and see how it functions in different places in the sentence. So first we're looking at the infinitive as subject. If you look at this example, to run allows us to exercise. You'll see that to run, which is the infinitive, is the subject of the sentence, allows is the verb. And actually, I snuck in another infinitive in this sentence as the direct object. So in this sentence, the subject is an infinitive, then us is an indirect object, and to exercise is the direct object. So you get to see it actually in two different places where a noun can be. The next example is using an infinitive as a subject complement. Remember, subject complement follows the linking verb, and it goes back and renames or describes the subject. So in this sample here, my favorite task is to run. To run is the complement in the sentence, and it's an infinitive. It follows that linking verb is, and it goes back and renames that subject task, gives you information about the task, tells you more about that subject. Again, it looks like a verb, but it's actually just like any other complement. That would be a one-word noun, okay? The next example is an infinitive as a direct object of the sentence. I love to run. So you look at that example, love is an action verb, and it takes an object, just like any other sentence does. It's transitive, and the object is to run. So in that case, it's very, very simple example, but it shows you that the infinitive can come in after the action verb and function as a direct object. The last example is using an infinitive as an appositive. And again, it's set off by commas, just like all other appositives, and it follows the noun that it opposes. And remember, to oppose means to be next to and to give details and explanation. So my favorite exercise, comma, to run, comma, burns a lot of calories. And of course, we're all cooped up in our houses and we're eating all kinds of junk food and getting all kinds of extra calories. So running might be something that we all need to get out and do right now while we're in quarantine. So you look at that positive and you see to run, and it follows the word exercise. Very simple, easy to spot, no problem. Okay, so we've talked about infinitives, simple infinitives in 3 different places in the sentence as nouns. The subject, the complement, the object, 4 places, and the appositive. Now moving on in this section, we're going to mix things up a bit. And again, this is what I mean about getting a little bit more complicated. We're going to look at infinitives in phrases. Quite honestly, most infinitives that we use are not just by themselves. They are almost probably 90% of the time that we use an infinitive, it's going to be an infinitive phrase. So here is an example of an infinitive phrase used as subject of a sentence. To run wind sprints prepares me for basketball season. So those of you, all my basketball players out there, you know who you are. You might be running some wind sprints in your backyard or on your driveway while you're in quarantine so that you can be ready for basketball season. This is the subject of the sentence, to run wind sprints. But instead of just having to run, you notice that this infinitive has its own direct object. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, wait a minute, it's a noun. How can it have a direct object? Well, remember, it's a verbal. So it's part verb, part noun, part verb, part adjective. It's a hybrid. All right. So even though it's functioning as a noun in the sentence and it's the subject, it has its own direct object, which is sprints. When you diagram that, we'll do that a little bit later, but when we diagram them, you'll diagram that infinitive as the subject, but when you'll actually have it diagrammed like a verb with the direct object, even though it will be on the subject line of the main line of the sentence. Moving on to the complement, I use the same phrase and I just moved it into different places in the sentence just to keep it really simple so you could see this and understand it. So using it as a complement in this sentence, my favorite task is to run wind sprints. You see in this sentence that task is the subject of the sentence, is the linking verb, and then to run wind sprints is the subject complement that's following that linking verb. Again, it goes back, it renames or describes, gives more information about task, which is the subject, which is a noun. The next example, just using it as a direct object, kept it really, really simple for you. I love to run wind sprints. I know that's not true, but I'm trying to be positive here. So I is the subject, love is an action verb. This is in the just real straightforward transitive active voice verb. And then to run wind sprints is our direct object. So it says, what do I love to do? I love to run wind sprints. Now, again, we have an infinitive and we have an infinitive with its own direct object, which seems counterintuitive because I'm telling you that it functions as a noun and then I'm telling you that it has a direct object. So you just kind of have to wrap your heads around that. The last example is as an appositive. My favorite exercise, comma, to run wind sprints, comma, prepares me for basketball. So same thing, it's following exercise, it's opposing that noun exercise, it's set off by commas, But you'll notice that it has its direct object with it. Now, all of these are very, very, very simple examples. Because most of the time when we use infinitive phrases, they can be very long and have lots of details. They can have direct objects. They can have adverbs. They can have adjectives. There are lots of different things. They can go on and on and on, actually. And they're almost like a little sentence within themselves sometimes. So they can get really complicated when you try to diagram them. Okay, so moving on, just this last section of this part of the chapter. Because an infinitive is a verbal, it does have some properties of a verb. That's what I would use to describe them. It can have, for instance, tense like a verb, and it can also have voice like a verb. So again, it's a noun, or it's an adjective, or it's functioning, as an adverb in the sentence, but it's, again, has these properties of being a verb. So I just put a couple of very simple examples here for you to see. One with a simple tense and an active voice. My job is to bake the pies. So again, to bake the pies is the phrase. It's just a simple tense and it's an active voice, just like we've been looking at. Now moving on to the next example, we have a simple tense in a passive voice. The pies are to be baked by me. Notice the infinitive is to be baked. All right, so now we have what we need for a passive voice in there, which is to have a helping verb, and it's a verb to be. So instead of it just being to bake, we now have to be baked. And remember, for it to be passive, the person who's doing the baking has to be in a by phrase at the end of the sentence or not be mentioned at all. And in this sentence, you can see it's to be baked by me. So the baker of the pies, you can tell I must be hungry since I'm talking about pies. The baker of the pies is in that prep phrase, by me. The last example is to show you what it looks like in a perfect tense. And I just gave you the active voice. I didn't put an example here of the perfect tense passive voice, but there are other examples in your book. So when you're looking through the chapter, it's at the very bottom of the page. The example for perfect tense active voice is my job is to have baked the pies for Thanksgiving. Now remember what we talked about in class, that the perfect tense means that the action that you're talking about is perfected in time. So it maybe hasn't even happened yet. You're talking about it in the present tense, which is why it says is, but you're talking about it as if it's already completed or perfected in time. So you look at that and you say that infinitive is to have baked. And you see that what has snuck in there that you have to have for perfect tense is a form of the verb have, has, or had. And we have there. To have baked the pies. And again, you see a prepositional phrase that I tacked on there because I always associate pies with Thanksgiving for some reason. So the phrase is to have baked the pies for Thanksgiving. Okay, so that's just the very, very beginning of the infinitive chapter, and I hope that these notes and some explanation are helpful for you. Again, we're going to take this very, very slowly. I know that it's hard. It's hard even if we were together and I could show you more examples. But I just think that if you take it a step at a time and you study the examples, that you'll be able to understand it. And I have a lot of confidence in you that you'll do fine with this. Again, I've posted a very small, short little practice for you with your workbook pages. And we're just going to continue to practice along with this. I will do some, I'll do a video for you where you can actually see me diagramming when it comes time to do that, because I think that will be helpful for you. All right, I just want you guys to know how much I miss you, and I wish that we could be together. And I hope that this is helpful, and feel free to message me on Schoology. Let me know, how I did, if there's anything that I can do with my voice or anything that makes it better for you. All right, kiddos, have a great day.